I'm Ironclad13. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm just double checking my system here to make sure everything's up and working, and we're nearly there. I have managed to get my camera slightly skew if. That should about do us. So there we are. So we're still painting commandos, but we are getting through them now. Haven't put anything up on Instagram in the last week or so, but I need to refill my wet palette. I need to wash my wet palette. Never mind. I don't think I put anything up on Instagram in the last week or so, but we have made progress. We have finished this guy, Rocket Boy. Insert your David Bowie references here as you will, but that's him. He's done. Quite proud of him. I think we just started him last time. So that's where we're at with the commandos. That's number, I can't count, number 7 out of 12. So we've got 5 to go. Well, 4.5 to go. We're on to Flamer Man now, and he's coming along quite nicely. I'm fairly happy with the way he's turning out. Still got a few details to go. Mostly the backpack and the flames. He does need some shading and some highlights, just because there's a few bits that I've done in black, and as you all know, black is a horrible colour for showing detail if you don't highlight it, so that's a work in progress. But I'm quite pleased. I don't know how well you can see this on the camera, but because orcs like to improvise things, I thought it would be absolutely hilarious if in his flamer hand, well, what do you use to handle hot things? You use oven mitts. So that's what he's got. He's got a giant orky oven mitt. And I don't regret it even slightly. But we do need to carry on making progress with this guy. And I've just realised I've spilt a wee bit of lead belcher from a clamp or something onto his leg. So he's got a bit of metal showing on his trousers, which is a bit weird. So I am just going to go in with a bit of Black Templar, and it's kind of under this hand, so no one's really going to see it if I just go in with a little bit of Black Templar and just cover it up. So we are just going to pretend that mistake didn't happen, because that's kind of the way we roll. So I think, where are we at now? We need to do something with this oil drum on his back, and it's the thing is, I hate painting scenery because I never know what colours to paint it, because if you're painting for an army, you always know what faction it is, so you've got like a basic colour scheme. But there's a lot of detail on that backpack, and the easy way to make it all stand out is to paint it different colours, but we're not necessarily going to be able to do that. But I think maybe if we go for a metallic contrast, if we put some lead belcher down and then maybe go over it with like a khaki green, give it that sort of military surplus barrel oil drum type feel. We'll see how that goes. We are going to need to base coat it though, which means we are going to need a larger brush, so put that one down. The minute everything's just coming up lead belcher. I've not done washes, shades or whatever on the metals yet, and that's because I tend to do those all at the same time, just because that makes life easy. At least it does for me. So we're not painting over the straps that he's got holding this to his back, because we are just going to do those with your standard brown leather, which I generally use Soigor brown for. In contrast, like contrast paints just make getting stuff table ready so much easier. You do have to be very careful with them so you don't end up overlapping your colours while they're wet, or even while they're dry, because correcting contrast once it's dry is an absolute pain in the backside, because you have to basically go in and re-base coat it with your base colour and then paint your contrast colour over the top. It's not so bad if you let one colour dry, and then if you're painting another colour next to it and you make a mistake, you can just go in with a washer brush, just go in with a wet brush and just kind of dilute the still wet mistake and just wipe it off. But You can't do that if both paints are wet. Then you just have a bad day and you end up with some weird awkward colour. Sometimes that's great, sometimes you get a new colour that looks good. A lot of the time you do not. I'm thinking I should maybe, because I do like just talking and kind of streaming of thought through these videos, but I do know that there are times where I don't necessarily have anything particularly groundbreaking to say, or I am just saying things that I've said before in previous streams. Now I know Twitch doesn't keep your streams up forever, so maybe I should start uploading past streams to YouTube or something, just so that there's an archive of stuff out there that you can go back to if you want to look at old stuff I've done. At the minute, it's all been orcs. It's been orcs, and nothing but orcs, because this is basically I'm doing the whole project essentially. I'm not doing everything on Twitch. I am painting in the downtime, but that's just because if I didn't, I wouldn't get any progress made if I only painted models for 45 minutes once a week. And I'm a relatively fast painter, I like to think, but I'm not that fast. And part of the reason is that I am a fast painter is because I am a bit of a lazy painter. I take shortcuts, I use easy tricks, because if you're not painting for a painting competition, then you only need to paint it to a standard that you're happy with. I think what we'll do is when we come back to put the green on this, we're just going to leave the tap in silver so that it looks like it's a different thing, because the whole point of this is that the whole thing looks very bodged together. So we'll leave a few metal bits in metal colours, just so that there's a bit of differentiation on the can there. But the flamer boy with the oil drum on his back, it reminds me a lot of some of the old orc models, where I think there was one where it was like a half track. It was essentially like the Orky equivalent of like a land speeder or something, because Space Marines had bikes, they had land speeders, and then they had their tanks. Orcs had bikes, then they had war tracks, I think, and then they had their tanks, or the equivalent of tanks. But the war tracks were like these weird half-track tractor things, and they kind of just had like a big old dustbin strapped to the back of them, and they looked hilarious, but in a brilliant kind of way. Like there's a lot of orky ingenuity going on there. I've got a lot of mechanics in here. So what we've got a big lever. We've got like a. Is that like a? I can't tell if that's supposed to be like a coil of wire or if it's meant to be like a pump. I think it's meant to be a pump. So, because this bit up top reminds me of the weird sort of float valve things you get in the top of a toilet. I wonder if that's actually what they've used. That's kind of genius, because that would give you an automatic like sort of pressure level gauges. Is that what they're called? I think they're called level gauges. Like a level gauge to control the fuel coming out at the end of the flamethrower. That is just the orkiest thing ever. We used part of a toilet to make a flamethrower. So we are going to do that in metal. And I know that everything on the back of that looks a bit lead belcher grey at the minute, but it's not going to stay lead belcher grey forever, although I have realised I've missed a bit. Not missed a bit. I have gotten some lead belcher on that pipe. The pipes I've done in copper just to keep them different. I think at some point I really need to get around to replacing the paper on this wet palette, because you can probably see up there from the camera's perspective, this palette has this particular sheet of paper has seen better days. It's a little full. I had a big experiment with yellow trying to paint Imperial Fists, of all things, because anyone out there who paints Warhammer models will know that painting Imperial Fists yellow is the hardest possible thing you can do. Second only to using that same yellow, painting Hazard Stripes. And I don't know what it is about yellow paint, but it is just the worst. I have tried a few brands that, I've not just used Games Workshop's yellow, and they're all not fantastic. So I'm going to assume that is something unique to Games Workshop, to Yellow Paint, not to Games Workshop, because that's not what I said. But I think what we'll do as well is we'll put a different color contrast over the pressure gauge thing at the top there. But I think after that is us having done all of the metals, which means it'll be time to get a wash and a shade. Which ain't too bad. Although I just missed it on the end of that. That's that wee ignition flame. So that is that. I think we are just about there. So then we go and we find that wonderful wash that gives a little texture to everything metal, and we are just going to go all over our metallics with that. I think I need a bigger brush. I'll just use what I've got on this one. There we go. That's better. That gives us a bit better coverage, because we are just painting all of our metal at the minute with the same black wash, so there's no need to muck around doing tiny bits, especially when, for example, the flames on the end of the tube there, they're going to get redone anyway, so there's not much point in being delicate around. I do intend to come back and do a few details on like the gauge and stuff in there, but that's going to have to wait until after the washes have dried, just because it's easier to do the pipes that way, or to get the metal pipe, the pipe painted with the metals. That's what I mean. I need to do something with the burn marks as well, because I don't know if you guys can see that texture there, but if I hold that up, this guy has some fairly nasty looking burn marks on his arms and hands. Hence probably why he has the need for the oven glove, I imagine. But I need to do something with them just to try and differentiate them, because obviously orc scarring is not going to look the same as human scarring, so I need to have a think about what the heck I'm doing with that. And if I just necessarily use the same shades et al over it, or whether I'd try something different. Right, just onto the drum now. So because I am basically just going to cheat a bit in that I'm essentially going to use the contrast paint on the oil drum like a glaze. So I'm basically going to do all of my shading and stuff on it first, so that when I put the contrast over it, it just kind of gets that natural highlight. And then I don't have to do quite as much work highlighting green. Do that copper pipe as well. Not that it's much of a pipe, it's just kind of the frame that this guy has his tank mounted on. I have to say, since Games Workshop released these painting handles, my life has been a lot easier. I didn't even know what painting handles were until Games Workshop released these, to be fair. I mean, I know you can probably get them from other places, and a lot of people would probably recommend them from other places, but I ended up buying the GW ones just because they were there, and I was lazy, and I don't regret it. But yeah, it has made things a lot easier, just because without my giant pudgy fingers clamped around certain parts of the model, it's easier to get a brush into certain spaces, or paint at different angles, just because you just gotta hang on to the handle and you're good. Right, so that is basically all of our... Nearly missed that wee bit in there. Right, that's our... I know he's got his feet. I forgot this guy had spiky toes. I'm not entirely sure why this guy has spiky toes. I mean, I would have expected Knifey here, for example, to have like those little prong things on his boots that you can kick people with, but for some reason it's on the flamethrower guy. I don't know, just in the event that you run out of petrol and you don't want to put your flamethrower down, you can start kicking people. I guess that's the logic behind it. Well, on a side note, as this is Coffee and Colours, today's flavour is jam donut. I finally got through the cinder toffee. I'm not sure the jam donut one is really my favourite. It's nice, but I think it's probably... I don't dislike it, but I think out of the ones I've had, it's probably the one I like the least so far. Not that there's anything wrong with that, it's perfectly pleasant coffee, because ultimately what matters is the caffeine fix, right? While that wash is drying, just going to do a few small bits that I know I haven't done yet. I partly haven't done them because I knew I'd be sat twiddling my thumbs while the wash was drying. So there's still a few wee leather straps here and there that I haven't painted yet. So I'm just going to slap some Cygor brown on them. And that largely resolves those. But that I think is it. So we've just got the straps on the drum, which we've done a relatively good job of not managing to cover in other paints. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this wee narrow brush here, and I'm just going to cheekily do the straps even though the wash is still wet. It's dark brown, so if it seeps into the wash at all, and it's a very dark brown, it's not gonna wreck it. Had a wee bit of spillage in the wrong place, but we caught that and it's fine now. So this is going to take a wee bit just to get in because I'm being kind of careful. I could have probably used a larger brush, but the larger brush would have definitely run over it. So we're just taking our time, keeping it neat. Obviously we can't tint the colour of the drum or anything until that wash is dry, so we may just kind of end up sitting for a bit. But that's okay. Still got 4 more orcs to paint, so there's definitely no shortage of things to do. I do wonder if they'll bring back war tracks. Although, I suppose orcs have kind of got their various buggies now, because you've got your squig lobba, squig chucka. There's a buggy that throws squigs. There's that. There's the dragster thing. There's the there's that weird thing with the jet engine. Oh, we really missed that bit. There we are. That's fine. Just dilute that. That runs into the crevices, and it just looks like part of the rest of the wash. Frankly, if I missed about it, was I just catching the light? That's just catching the light. Weird. That's fine. Although I realised that I have just a tiny bit of metal down here. Oh, that's not metal. That's a strap. That's fine. We can get in there. It's probably just as well we got the small brush for that, because that is a narrow space. There we go. All good. So, what we got left? Now, wash around the front of the model's drying. The barrel's taking a wee while yet, but that's okay. Excuse me. So I think what we'll do is I am going to see if I can't try and do a wee bit of heat bloom on the muzzle. So if we go with that and just put a wee bit of black wash over it there. That's going to take a wee bit to do. But that's fine, because we don't want that to be entirely dry. And that's doing okay. So we need a different colour. Where is... I have a much brighter silver. There we are. Going to paint the wee indicator on the flamer dial here. Just give our paint a good shake. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to paint the back of it so that the dial stands out in the metal, and then I'm going to shade the back of it, or rather I'm going to put some contrast in so it actually looks like a glass thing. Now, how dry is the wash in his eye sockets? Because there doesn't need to be a huge amount of wash in there, to be fair, because we are also going to do a bit of a lens effect on them too, because he's obviously got some job as some sort of scrap boy welding up bits of whatever, so he's gonna have a face mask on that lets him not go blind when he's welding. So while our wash on the flamer is drying, I think we're just going to get in there and put a wee bit of that. Don't get too much paint on the brush there, because that is a very, very small socket. Just wipe the excess off with our finger. There we are. That's one thing. If you want to essentially put something bright in a recess, you can just be a bit messy with it and then just go back and wipe off with your finger. That saves you a lot of farting around trying to get tiny brushes in small spaces and having to redo it again and again. Just wipe off the excess. So what we're going to do here is we're going to grab a nice bright blue contrast. And we're just going to go in there over that wee dial. Because the contrast is going to pool naturally, it's going to give us a bit of natural shading. But if I hold that up to the camera, hopefully it focuses, you can see how that wee gauge now looks. Quite pleased with that personally. If the camera could focus, that'd be great. There we go. How cool is that? my fuel gauge. And I think we've been doing our lenses all the same colour. What have we got so far? We've got one guy with red lenses. We've got a guy with a sort of scuba mask and a blue lens. Well, we've done his fuel gauge in blue, so I think maybe we don't want to do his eyes the same. So we're going to go with the orange for his eyes. And just pop that in there. Wipe off the stuff we don't want. You can see that's coming on quite nicely. And then when that's dry, we can go over that with a bit of varnish just to give it that nice sort of glassy gleam. So the end of the flavor is coming on nicely. I think we need, is it Drucci Violet next, which is a purple wash, just to tint it. What we're going to do is we're going to have our, we're not quite painting in stripes, but we are sort of painting in blocks. So some of the black, or rather the purple, is going to overlap some of the black. You can see some of the black there hasn't actually dried, but that doesn't matter. It's fine. Just mix it together a bit and it makes it look a bit more natural. I think that purple might need a second coat, but we'll see. It'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. So how's the tank on the back now? That wash has just about dried. So we can get in there and we can start putting our tints onto that. So we're going to do it like a military style barrel. So maybe our orky companion here has liberated it from the Imperial compound or something. Just give our paint a good shake, get it all mixed up. Because I mean, you can see that on the bottom of the pot there. That's nothing to worry about. That's just the pigment settling to the bottom of the fluid. But you do have to mix it up again to get the proper use out of the paint, because otherwise you get this sort of weird diluted stuff. Right, that'll do. So take a slightly larger brush because we are covering a bigger area, but we still want to be fairly neat about it. And then we're just going to go in and we'll start with the top just so that we can get any excess paint off our brush, because that's a nice big flat space to lose any extra paint on. And that, I think, is coming out quite well. That looks a lot like I hoped it would. We're not going to cover that bit where the weird pressure thing is stuck to the side. We're going to do that in something different. Give it that ramshackle look, like an orc's just bolted these two things together and made a weapon out of them, because that is essentially what orcs do. You can just see how that's keeping that sort of metallic sheen, but it's now a green colour. And it's still got the shading in the recesses there. I love contrast paint for this, I absolutely love it. Let's get into those wee crevices. And I just managed to paint my fingers. Great, never mind. It's all fine. It's all fine. Nothing is wrong here. Carry on. Just need to wash my hands before I have my lunch. another large strap that's come around the back there. We've got the green contrast on just now, so we'll just have to neaten that up once the green contrast dries. But that gives that a nice military look to it. I'm not so sure about doing his boots in green. I thought kind of it would be funny that, you know, after he's had the oven mitt, it would be funny to give him a pair of green welly boots. But I'm not necessarily sure that was the best idea. But you know what? It doesn't look awful, and if it doesn't look awful, it's probably more hassle than it's worth to go back and change it. So we're just going to make do. Just missed a bit there, we're going to just get that. Because I'm a big believer that finished models are better than perfect models. So that's the vibe we're going for. But you can see how his back is no longer just one big block of grey steel. That looks a lot better now. Having a look at the flamer and the heat bloom we're doing, you can sort of see the effect starting to take shape, but I think that does need another layer of purple around there, so we're just going to do that. There we are. Now you can see that starting to get real purpley. So that sorts that nicely. Got a wee bit too much there. The problem, well, I mean, I've painted heat bloom on a few other things before, and it's a lot of fun, but it's quite a, I'm not going to say a hard effect to do, because you're throwing shades over a thing, but contrast paint is too thick and shades are almost too thin to do it in one go. So you do have to layer your coats to get any kind of consistent colour out of it. No, that's fine. So that's the tanker drying. So we're going to get in and we're going to fix those bits up again. There we are. That pot did not want to open that time. Where is it? It was that side. There we are. Paint that strap. Oops, dropping my brush. I do not recommend just throwing your brushes away, especially not in the middle of using them. That is not what I would call good life advice. Right, so about this pressure thing on the side of it, I think we will do, because that comes in two halves, so I think we'll do one half in yellow and one half in red, just to give it a sort of vaguely industrial feel. If we do the larger half in red, oh, that's a lot of paint. That is far too much paint on the brush. I don't want that. There we are. That's better. There we go. Oops, catching the camera stand on my brush there. I need to find out a better location for that to sit, because where the camera is actually at just now is not a bad place for me for actually seeing what I'm doing, but it is not a great place for me to not run into. So I'll need to think about that, but never mind. And there's our red. Again, that's a wee bit too much paint. So just take some of that off our brush and get back to it. And that, I think, is starting to look quite good. That's the red. There is, I've just missed a spot on the yellow. So we're going to get that sorted. This is half the battle with painting, is that you do a thing and then you realise you've missed part of it, and you forever realise that you're missing parts of it. And you're forever touching up after yourself. There we go. And like I just said, there's a bit of the red we've missed underneath. Yeah. So just get in and neatly go back over that. There we are. I think I will come back to that little groove in between the two sections of that with just a black wash, just to hide the fact that I think there's still some white base coat showing through there. We don't want that. Let's carry on with our heat bloom on the flamer there. Hopefully by the time we get to the end of this we'll have the finished heat bloom and you guys can see how cool it looks. The blue on there, because I don't necessarily have an image or something to hand, but if you think about the way the colours kind of change through like an exhaust thing, so like you can see how that's starting to come on. Can't remember if I've gotten those the right way around. I don't know if it's black, blue, purple or black, purple, blue. It might be black, blue, purple because blue's closer to black than purple is, but we've done it now and it looks funky, and maybe they're burning some weird chemical that doesn't give you a conventional heat bloom, because this is the 41st millennium and shit's just weird. That's basically my excuse for anything in Warhammer that doesn't seem entirely realistic. It's because it's the future. There are literally aliens and monsters and demons, and realism kind of doesn't matter. So, because it's not a realistic setting. I remember some of the edition changes. Like, I think when we went from 7th edition to 8th edition. A lot of people lamented the fact that tank rules changed. So back in the days of yore, tanks used to be harder to kill from certain directions and easier from others. So like real world tanks, they had thicker or thinner armor depending on what side of the vehicle it was. So if you think about a real tank, a real world tank has thicker armour at the front, because in an ideal scenario the front is the part of the vehicle that you are pointing at the enemy, so that's obviously where you put the most armour. And you know, Warhammer tanks did kind of replicate that, and infantry would have a toughness value, and that basically just sort of represented how resistant they were to actually being harmed. Nowadays everything runs on toughness. There's no armor value for vehicles anymore, and I don't mind that. I do miss the old armor values, because I thought those rules were fun and it did differentiate vehicles and infantry quite well. I'm just putting a wee bit of gloss varnish in here just so we've got that nice glass effect on the lenses and the dial. But yeah, a lot of people, I think, complained that the change in armor values lost realism, and okay, yes, that is true. there was a loss of realism for that. But this is a game that also has elves in space in it, so I'm not sure realism is necessarily the highest of your priorities. It's also got these crazy guys in it who, you know, basically run on the power of shared belief, which from a philosophical perspective is kind of cool, but absolutely not realistic. They're also bright green. I mean, have you ever met anyone bright green who wasn't horrendously ill or covered in paint? So we're getting there. We are very much getting there. So if I hold that up now, you can see the heat bloom. I think I have gotten my colours the wrong way around. I think heat blooms do go black to blue to purple. I've gotten the blue and the purple the wrong way around, but it does look cool anyway, so I'm just going to live with it. My model, I can do what I want. You can't stop me. Although I have realised that I have gotten a bit of spillage on some of the metal, so we're just going to go back over that and just... We're not even fully painting over that silver there, because obviously that silver's had its shading on it, and the purple is quite a dark colour. So we're sort of just putting a very thin coat over that. It's not entirely hiding the purple, but it also doesn't lose the shading effect that we've done, because if I hold that up to the camera, you can see that that silver on the ignition bit there looks much like the rest of it. So rather than going back and redoing the whole thing and reshading it, we basically just let the shades blend into each other, and that saves us half the job. So what we are going to have to rebase coat is the flames at the end. Painting fire is a bit weird. I have never actually painted fire properly before. I'm probably going to have to do it with this guy, because God knows whatever he's got in his tank. But when I've been painting, for example, Chaos Space Marines in the past and the Master of Possession, he's got fire and gubbins and whatnot coming out of his eyes and hands, etc. But Gary Workshop also make this handy glow paint, which I think was originally for painting ghosts. Is a kind of, well, they make two. One's a sort of smoky grey blue. The other is like this bright green thing. So I used that basically just to give him like creepy green flames. Because, you know, he's an evil sorcerer, so creepy, unnatural effects are exactly what you expect, but I don't think I'm going to get away with it on this one. And the thing about painting fire is that you kind of get your shades and stuff backwards. It's like, it's brighter towards the middle. Excuse me. And then it gets darker as you come out. But I've never actually painted fire before. And I'm actually kind of I've got a few pictures on the screen here, just so that, well, I mean, obviously you guys can't see what I'm looking at. But yeah, so essentially the way fire seems to go is that we have a sort of yellowy colour, although we also have our ignition light, so that's just going to be a blue flames. If I recall correctly, you've got sort of blue on the outside and then like a sort of a purple in the middle. So I guess what we'll do there is we will paint that one blue, and then we'll give it a purple wash. We might need to give it two just to get the purple to show properly, or even like pinpoint shading with it, but that's fine. we'll make do. But we are going to need a bright yellow, and thankfully that's what things like this are for, because I paint most of my contrast yellows with Eandon yellow, with Nazreg yellow, which gives you the colour on his shirt, which has had a shade, to be fair. It's had Agrax over it, but that's just a nice solid mid yellow. Eandon yellow is bright yellow, but that is also kind of what we want. So we are going to just layer a little bit of that on. Now this is naturally going to pull in some of the recesses, but we can maybe try and scrape a little bit of the extra paint off. Just so that it doesn't pull too badly. And then my cunning plan, and I haven't looked up any tutorials or anything like this, I'm basically just looking at a picture of some fire and trying to paint what I see. And that is basically that we have like a sort of yellow center of the flame and then like a red outer, which, depending on what you're burning, kind of tinges to black around the edges as it starts just sort of releasing the particles and the dust rather than the fuel. So maybe what we do is we paint that yellow and then we come back and give it like a dry brush to catch the outer parts with a red or something, but that is going to have to sit and dry for the contrast paint. And then the red is going to have to wait, because unfortunately that is my cue, because I only get about 45 minutes on a Monday lunchtime to do these, because I unfortunately have other commitments. So that is going to be us for today. Thank you all for joining me. I'll try and get some pictures of the finished models up on Instagram, just so that there's a record of progress. But that's us for today. So we've gotten most of our medals done. We've got the tank on the back done. We've got the heat bloom on the flamer, scorcher, whatever you call them. And yeah, that's coming on quite well. I think the islanders haven't quite come out the way I wanted, but they're so small. I think I was maybe making them a little more complicated than they had to be. I'm not sure they necessarily even have lenses in them, but they do now, so it is what it is. But yeah, that's where we're at. We've made some decent progress. Thank you again, folks, and I will see you next time.